In this tutorial, we're first going to learn how to do if on edge bounce in a way that we don't actually use the block itself. We're going to program it ourselves so that you can understand what is inside of the if on edge bounces, what is actually happening. And you need to know how to create a variable to do this. So the variable that we want to create to begin with is speed. We're going to set the speed to something specific. So first, I want you to create a new project and then go to variables. And when you're in variables, I want to, which is this one here, right? The orange one. I want you to make a new variable. And I'm going to name my variable speed, right? It's the speed at which it moves. And importantly, what I want you to realize is that when the speed is positive, it's going to move in this direction. And when the speed is negative, it's going to move in this direction, right? So if you've been studying your math, you know that the sign on a number is really about the direction. So like a positive number is going in this direction and a negative number is going in that direction. Or it could be that a positive number goes in this direction and a negative number goes in this direction. It really depends on what the conventions are. That means that it depends on what you and I and everybody else has agreed on that positive and negative means. So really think of negative numbers as being the opposite direction of the direction that we usually go in, right? So I've created here a variable called speed, right? And I need a control. And the first thing I want to do with my control is that I want to use some kind of activation to do something, right? So I'm going to just start off with setting using the green flag clicked, which is this element up here. So when you click that, something very specific is going to happen. And what I want to do is I'm going to want to move my sprite to a very specific position. I'm not going to use the cat sprite, right? So really, the first thing I want to do is I want to right click on my sprite, which is on the Mac means pushing down the control key and clicking on your sprite and then going delete, right? Now, I'm going to create a new sprite and I'm going to paint my sprite myself. So I'm going to click on this one. And what I want here is a very simple straight line. So I'm going to I'm going to select the line tool, which is right there, and I'm going to click on the screen, and then I'm going to hold down the shift key on my keyboard to make sure that it becomes a straight line. You see, with a straight, that means that it will either be straight up vertically or it would be straight horizontally. So I'm going to make my line horizontal just like that, right? And then I'm clicking click OK. And now you can see it's right in the middle in the center here. Now I don't want it to really be in the center. I want it to be more down here somewhere. So the first thing I'm going to do is for this specific sprite in my script, I'm going to select when the flag is clicked, I am going to go to a very specific place. So I am going to go to the XY coordinate. And remember, oh, wait, let's see here. Oh, there we go. Right? So remember, the X coordinate goes in this direction and the Y coordinate goes up and down like that. So I'm going to want to move my sprite to about here, right? And I can see down here what the position of my cursor is. So I can position my cursor right there and see that minus 34 minus 131. So I'm going to make this to roughly minus 32 and that's 40, but so let's do it 30 and minus 130. I think that's what it was. Yeah, minus 130, right? That's where I want my sprite to start off. And once I've done that, when I click, so you can see I can position my sprite up here now, and when I click the green flag, it goes right there where I want it to start off, right? And the next thing I want to do is I'm going to want to now start moving my my sprite back and forth and bouncing off the walls. And I could, of course, do that by using a forever loop and then putting if on edge bounce there and just moving it. But I'm going to do it a little bit differently. So if I go to my controls here, the first thing I need is a forever loop. And I'm going to attach my forever loop here. And in my forever loop, I am going to want to move it. So move 10 steps. And if I do that, of course, what we get is this, and it just moves, and it just moves off there. But that's not really what we want. So let's go back into our variables. And before we even go into this forever loop, remember, this is a loop that goes on. We want to set the speed to something very specific, right? And the speed, again, is the variable that I created myself right up here. I'm going to want to set the speed to 10. And instead of moving 10 steps, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move as many steps as the speed is set to. And again, when let me see here. Let me right click on the sprite and then show it, and right there it is. And when I start it there, it goes off and it doesn't really bounce. And I could, of course, go in and I could do that sensing I could go to the motion and say if on edge bounce. But I'm going to choose something else. So what I'm going to do is, instead of that, I'm going to use an if block, right? If block. This is an if block. That means some kind of condition has to be filled. And I'm going to say if, and then I'm going to go to the sensing. And instead, I'm going to use touching, right? But instead of touching another sprite, I'm just going to do if touching edge. We don't really have another sprite. So if touching edge, either here or there, I am going to reverse the speed. That means I'm going to turn the positive speed into a negative speed. And really, remember what that means in math. It means changing the direction of it. So I go into my variables again, and I'm going to set the speed to, and then here I need my operators, and now I'm going to do something tricky. I am going to multiply the speed itself, right? This is very, very tricky, but it works really well because that's the way math is. Math is really revealing what's going on in the very structure of our world in some way. So we're going to actually take this speed and we're going to multiply it by -1. And when you do that, you're going to see that every time that you multiply something by -1, it changes the sign of a variable. So if it's 10, multiplying by -1 is going to mean that it becomes -10. And if it's -10 and you multiply it by -1, it's going to become a positive number. It's going to become 10 again, because a negative number multiplied by a negative number makes a positive number. So let's do that. Let's write in here. So if I write here, I click in there and I go -1. So I set the speed to speed times -1, right? Let's see what actually happens, because you see the if statement is inside the forever loop, and every time the forever loop executes, it's going to move whatever the speed is. So the speed starts off by being 10, and then if it touches the edge, it's going to set the speed to be the speed times -1. And you're going to see this is what's going to happen. It's going to do exactly the same thing that you did in the motion where it says if on edge bounce. So it's really telling us what's happening when this block gets executed. All right, so let's test it out and see what happens. There, oh, it went against the edge and it bounced. Whoa, it bounced again, and woo, there it goes again. Yeah, and you see we'll go on like that, on and on and on and on. And now I'm going to show you one more step. So if you want to figure this one out, so you can pause the video now and actually try to implement this to see how it works. But there is another step that I'm going to show you now. So let me pause that. I'm going to go back into the controls, and I'm going to introduce another control element, and I'm going to say when left arrow is clicked, I am very simply going to set my variable to set speed to, and then I'm going to make that -1. That means that if you click the left key on your keyboard, the speed is going to be in a negative direction, meaning going this way, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do exactly the same thing, but I'm going to do the opposite for the right key. I'm going to set the variable of the speed to the speed variable to a positive number, so I'm going to set it to 10 in this case. And now if I execute this, let's see what happens. Of course, if I don't press anything on my keyboard, it just goes back and forth and back and forth. It's going back and forth like a ping pong ball. And now if I start pressing my arrow keys on my keyboard, let's say that now it's going in a negative direction, now positive direction. Now I press the left key. Ooh, it changed direction. And the same, I can do it again. And I can go into the right, and I can use my keys here just to change the direction, right? And that's how I control this element. And in the next tutorial, we're going to see how I can actually use this to bounce some element off my element here. And really what I'm doing here is, and for you who might not have figured it out, I'm creating a very simple game, one of the first games ever created, called Pong, right? So you see I can control my element now, and there, bounce, bounce, and I change the direction by pressing the key. And you can see here, over here, when I press my keys, you can see these elements being highlighted. So I'm pressing the left key, the right key, the left key, the right key. You see them being highlighted here to very easily show you what is actually going on with my user interaction. So now you should try it yourself.